Okay, I want to welcome everybody to our March 8th, 2022 council meeting. It's kind of an exciting night for us. With that, I'm going to call the roll.
Anton,
Yes.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press, Steinbrink,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Welsh.
Okay, now I'd like to call up Marissa and Lieutenant Michael Palutro. And then the chief is going to say a few words for us.
Good evening, everybody. It is an exciting time for us. Just, I want to go ahead and provide everybody here who is unfamiliar with Michael, just a little background on him and his career here in Gates Mills. So Mike was hired on as a part-time police officer here in 1998, May of 1998 to be exact, where he served in that capacity until he was promoted to full-time police officer later on that year. This September, Michael had completed 24 years of service with the Village of Gates Mills. Michael was promoted to the rank of sergeant in March of 2015, and he has been assigned to the patrol division. Over the years, Sergeant Palutro has received the Medal of Valor in 2009 for his role in saving a woman from a burning car that crashed on County Line Road. Sergeant Palutro has served as a field training officer. He was a member of the regional bomb unit that we have here locally. He has been a child safety seat technician. He still currently is our lead firearms instructor and supervisor, and he is our field training officer supervisor. Sergeant Palutro has attended the following supervisory and leadership course to prepare him for this role. He has attended first line supervision, the Police Executive Administrative Leadership School. He has attended the Police Executive Leadership College. He has attended the Law Enforcement Executive Development Association Command Institute for Law Enforcement Executives. So Mike's done quite a bit throughout his career here at Gates Mills. He's done a phenomenal job for us. Sergeant Palutro resides in Highland Heights with his wife Marissa and their two children, Michael and Dominic. They just want to raise their hand. There they are. And I just want to take this opportunity to recognize Michael's father, who's in attendance, Mr. Rocco Palutro. I know he's had a huge influence on Michael during his tenure as a police officer. Rocco Palutro is a retired Cleveland police chief, did 30 years with the city, and he's seen a lot. So Michael comes from a police family. Certainly Rocco was a big influence on Mike's career and the life that he has, and he wanted to certainly follow in his footsteps. So Mr. Chief Palutro, I wanted to recognize you if you would just kind of. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mayor Snyder.
Very, very exciting. You'll raise your right hand. I, Michael Palutro, do hereby swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America.
Right.
The Constitution of the State of Ohio. And the Charter and ordinances of the Village of Gates Mills. And that I will honestly, faithfully, and impartially discharge my duties as a police lieutenant.
Faithfully discharge.
To which I have been appointed according to the law and the best of my ability. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I think we're just going to go ahead and break for a few minutes. We're going to let the council meeting continue. All of Michael's guests, whoever wants to take photos, we're going to exit right out of the side there. And we're going to go right next door and take pictures in the Village Hall Rotunda. So we'll just take a minute to clear out of here and then I'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming for Michael. So creepy about it. It's probably quite the- Oh, excuse me. No worries. That's okay. I don't know. We lost Ed. Okay, we're gonna, what's next? Okay. Again, thank you all for coming. So now we're gonna move on to minutes from the council meeting from February 8th. Beth? You need an emotion?
So moved?
Aton,
Yes.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press, Steinbrink,
Abstain?
Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Welch. Ed, do you approve the minutes?
Okay. Okay, thank you. Next is pay ordinance 1259 for $411,363.03.
Move to approve. Second?
Aton,
Yes.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press, Steinbrink,
Yes.
Turner. Yes. Welch.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe. Okay. So next is a financial statement, which was in everyone's packet, but I'm going to have Beth read it.
This is Steve Somborski's Treasurer's Report from February 2022. Financial statements were distributed to the mayor, clerk, and council in advance of the council meeting. The village continues to be in a very solid financial position. In February, the village received $1,358,000. Revenue from municipal income taxes and real estate taxes were $516,000 and $815,000 respectively. For the year, real estate taxes collected are $995,000, slightly above prior year of $979,000. For the year, municipal income tax revenue was $756,000, down from 2021 when the village received a non-recurring receipt of $2 million. Excluding that larger receipt, revenue in 2021 would have been $471,000. And so the 2022 figure of $756,000 is quite favorable. Overall, the tax receipts to date are stronger than were budgeted in December. Other revenue of $77,000 for the 2 months was significantly less than prior year due to decreases in all other source categories, notably permits and licenses, interest income, mills building rental income, other rental income, and miscellaneous income. Permits and licenses are a function of building and commercial activity. Interest is down as expected and budgeted. Mills Building revenue should increase starting July with occupancy of the first floor space following the renovation. Fines and costs should increase mid-year from traffic camera enforcement. Expenditures for the month were $397,000 and $1,344,000 for the year, which includes $451,000 of transfers from the general fund to other special purpose funds. Departmental expenses were $397,000 in February and $495,000 in January. Transfers are consistent with the appropriation approved by council in January to establish funding for eventual 2022 costs that are borne by other village funds, such as capital improvements. The departmental expenditures are the operating costs to run the village. Compared to prior year, there were some notable differences. In administration, legal and professional services were doubled compared to last year at this time, and income tax collection expense was down due to lower receipts this year. The police department is generally in line with last year, except for higher dispatch operating costs. In the fire department, our EMS costs were paid in February this year, where they were billed and paid in March last year. With very tough winter weather in January and February, service department costs were up in compensation, overtime, and salt. As the books of the village are maintained essentially on a cash basis, there can be large variances based on when cash is received and expenses are paid. Month over month and year over year, it is not uncommon to have a surplus one period and a shortfall the next period. At month end February 2022, general fund cash was $7,863,000 and cash in other funds was $1,431,000 for a total cash position of $9,294,000. We ended 2021 and started 2022 with combined cash of $8,266,000. This report will be posted on the village's website.
Thank you, Beth.
Karen, I have a separate question. Are we recording or streaming tonight?
We are.
Okay, I just didn't see anything up on the screen.
Well, that's because we're going to have a little presentation. And so they're set up for that.
Checking.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, under mayor's report, I've got one little note, and we all enjoyed, this is from Julie, Mayor Schneider. Thank you so much for your help the past 3 years. It's been my pleasure to cover the village of Gates Mills. I enjoyed working with you and your administrative team and village council. Please keep in touch. Sincerely, Julie. So she's moved on from reporting. That's really all I have. Committee reports, clerk's report, sorry.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Committee reports.
I will report on the Cell Tower Committee, which I remind is not an official committee. It's a committee of one, but I've been appointed to keep track of cell towers. So just to alert the audience and remind council, we've been working on this for a couple of years. We have designated a site, what we call South Gates Mills, and a site in North Gates Mills. We have approached cell carriers, the cell companies, to try to get them interested in become part of the tower, to take a lease on the tower. Once we would get at least one, we would then proceed to try to build out the tower. This past month, well, as a bit of background history, 2 years ago, Gilmore Academy was working hard to put a tower on their property, which would have been fine. That would have covered the south portion of Gates Mills. It actually got to the 11th hour and 59th minute. That's a quote from all the people involved. And the headmaster, or whatever her title is, a very good person, but she got nervous about cell tower waves and little kids. And there was an article floating around from the West Coast that might cause cancer. It was subsequently proven that it was actually the water supply, not the cell tower, but she canceled the contract. And so that's what caused us to try to find an alternative. Well, this past month, Gilmore has come back and said, gee, we're going to put stadium lights or light poles around our football field. And we'd actually like to just add effectively cell tower, cell communication on top of those light poles. And they came to planning and zoning this past week to get approval, or at least preliminary on from a planning and zoning standpoint at need. So since we have been planning on trying to get a cell tower and now they were trying to, we talked to the carrier that we've both been dealing with just to make sure there was no confusion. And we were able to have a separate meeting with all the people from Gilmore to say, hey, we're all on the same page. We want cell coverage. That particular part of town is just, there's some incredible dead spots. And so we've agreed, we're working together. An engineering study is being undertaken by one of the carriers to look at the area that a tower would cover, one sitting on top of the light poles on the football field at Gilmore, contrast that to the other location, and want to make sure that we can cover as many of the villagers as we can from either spot. So it's unfolding. It's possible that the Gilmore location, since it was already approved by, in that particular case, Verizon, that might be able to move it up on the priority list because we haven't been getting, we were not going to get anything in 2022 and they're not optimistic about 2023, but it's possible if we could get the right coverage at the Gilmore location, it wouldn't be quite as high. So that's what we're trying to check out. But just alerting council that this is, still moving forward at a snail's pace, but we're working hard at it. And this Gilmore development could be a very interesting, positive development, assuming it gets roughly the same coverage or certainly adequate coverage for those that would be affected.
Two questions. One is it about revenue or about quality of service? And the second one is, where's the other location ballpark that you're looking at besides Gilmore?
Okay, so let me answer all of those. The revenue, if it was a village tower, could over time be good, but the quality of service is paramount. And so if Gilmore wants to do it and it could come sooner, I think that might be a good solution. The location that we have pinpointed is in the center of Gates Mills Boulevard, deep in the woods. So it would be east of what's the cut through here? Your street, Chartley, east of the Chartley cut through, right near the gas well there. So there's already utilities there. If you look at it from either side of Gates Mills Boulevard, you wouldn't see it, it's buried in the trees. And it looks like that would give good coverage. Quite frankly, the Gilmore location, on the one hand, might be a better location, but since the tower wouldn't be as high, we're just not sure. So, and the north location, which the carriers haven't expressed as much interest in yet, we negotiated with the Gates, with the Mayfield schools, the environmental center that's out there, and they've agreed that they would allow us to rent for $1 a year a small section of their property and put a tower on that, which would cover the north end of the village. And we're, there's a lot of sense that the demand for towers is going to increase with 5G and all the things that are going to be connected. So we're hoping that and maybe some of this government money as it works its way down will help fund more, and the desire to get, everybody to have adequate cell coverage. So we're hoping the activity and interest from the carriers will pick up, but we're working at it.
Any other questions? Another report.
I have a couple of administrative matters that I think are important to, to raise. And one has to do with our new email, village emails, which we distributed to the council members before the last council meeting. So early in February. And I just wanted to reinforce the fact that we all should be using that email. Really, it's kind of precautionary for the village. If all of us are using our village emails, and there's any kind of request for, information about communications back and forth, it's really a lot more efficient if all of us have had all of our government communications through the village email. If you use your private email for village business, then a request for information would go into your private email. So I think in these times, it's really important for us to start using that. Mike Day is available if anyone's having any difficulty making the transfer over. Please get in touch with him.
Thank you.
The other had to do with some training recommendations that were made during the new hire, or not new hire, the new councilman training that we did in December. And that has to do with some important training. One is public relations training. The other is Ohio ethics law training. These are trainings that have to do with sunshine laws, ethics in government, that obviously are important for new council members to be apprised of. Craig has completed his. Lori asked for an extension to be completed by the end of March. And I'm hoping that Mike, you and David would also be willing to complete yours by the end of March. Is that doable?
Sure, I've done it.
Okay, when you're finished, just let Janet know. Okay, thank you very much. The final one is social media training that all of us need to take. That's done by the fire chief, by Tom Robinson, and it's also important training, talking about emails and social media and Facebook, and again how popular those are, but obviously how dangerous those can be for government officials. So please let Tom know. He'll have the attorney send an email to you. I've started the training. It's very entertaining. There's videos, etc. So it shouldn't be painful at all. So if we could complete that, all of us, by the end of March too, I think that would be good. The final comment has to do with Mayfield schools. There is a breakfast, a community leaders breakfast on Friday, March 18th. So if everyone's recovered from St. Patty's Day, we look forward to seeing you there at 7:30 at the Mayfield High School. So it's all of the communities that are part of the Mayfield School District.
PM.
7:30 a.m. It's a breakfast meeting.
Okay.
Okay, March 18th. I did send it around, but again, it's 7:30, March 18th at the high school. Thank you.
Okay. Right.
One question, Mayor. The Land Conservancy, have they filled the vacancy on the board?
No, I did not go to the meeting this morning, but I did get a report that the President, Rob Galloway, is going through the list of nominations that he had previously and is going to go to the next name on the list. Okay.
Thank you.
Greg?
Two updates, one on real estate and the other on the safety committee. The real estate committee has met twice in the last 3 weeks regarding the space that's being vacated by Cindy Halley. Happy to report that we've got multiple parties interested in that space. Probably a little too early to talk about at this point in time, but it's good that we're seeing some interest, and I'm hopeful that maybe we'll have something more concrete by the next meeting regarding that space. So that's real estate. The safety committee met a couple of things there. In no particular order, Gatsos was on site doing preliminary site work for the cameras the middle of last month. This again was preliminary site work. This isn't going to be up and running until sometime this summer. Again, just as a reminder, there will be a 30-day notice period with plenty of signage on both sides of Mayfield Road, indicating that there are in fact cameras in the village, and there will be plenty of notice for both villagers and those that travel through the village regarding that. The village has ordered 6 body cameras, and those will be in place and active in the very near future. There was a grant that was applied for by the state of Ohio that funded nearly all of that purchase. The remaining part of that balance came out of the Gates Mills Safety Fund. So really, there were no out-of-pocket costs to purchase those body cameras. And along with the dashboard cameras, they'll be integrated. So that's a nice feature. The only thing that will cost something for the village is the licensing and the data service, actually for storing the data that's on those cameras. As everyone may have seen, the state of Ohio, effective July 1st, passed legislation that was signed by the governor, effectively changing regulations around fireworks. And has basically, the legislation allows for 20 separate days throughout the year that fireworks can be lit off and demonstrations can be held, and you can purchase fireworks for personal use in the state of Ohio. As you may know now, is you go to a fireworks store to purchase fireworks, you have to sign off and saying that you're taking them out of the state of Ohio effective July 1st. That's no longer the case. The fire chief gave a presentation around some of his concerns, particularly around storage of fireworks. We live in a heavily wooded village. The potential for unintended consequences of fires and so forth. And the safety committee unanimously voted to opt out of the legislation that was passed by the state of Ohio. So we'll be working with the law director to get an ordinance in front of council in all likelihood at the April meeting, that we can get that on readings and get that passed before the law goes into effect on the 1st of July. And that's all I have for safety and real estate.
Were you going to say something about P and Z?
Chip kind of covered everything. I think from,
I've got a P&Z question for you, Craig. Actually, it's more in the line of a suggestion. Nancy Sogg's terms coming to an end at the end of this calendar year. We know that the master plan will be finishing about the same time and be downloading. If it's like 98, they'll be downloading a lot of things to the P&Z for codification. Seems to me it would be appropriate to start identifying early, identifying somebody now to join in January to take Nancy's spot so that they can shadow the process and then be ready when that download occurs.
Good question. I appreciate the comments regarding shadowing. I think one of the things that Nancy and frankly Sally Burke and others who have been on the council or been on planning and zoning for a long time is the institutional knowledge that they bring to the committee. I realize not everybody agrees with everybody's viewpoints regarding the village, but I think diversity of thought and diversity of opinion is important. And so I don't know that it's my place as chair of the committee to be stepping on the mayor's toes in terms of what her thoughts are for who should be on the committee. But I think we've got a good cross section on planning and zoning now of people who represent the various interests of all villagers. And, I think someone like Nancy and Sally, who recently came off the committee. I mean, I've been on there 6 years. I think Nancy's been on 10 or 12 years. Sally's probably
Quite a while.
a long time. So I think to be in those meetings and when questions come up around why is this written this way? Why do we have this way? To be able to have some of that institutional knowledge around, I think personally for me is helpful as questions come up and residents ask questions that, frankly.
Let me try round 2 then. Right now, I think P&Z is out of balance. There's 2 either councilmen or former councilmen who are very pro-development in their point of view. And I think the committee's out of balance because there's too much pro-development. There should be some of the other side as well. I, for one, won't support Nancy continuing on the committee after this year.
Excuse me, you're accusing me of being pro-development. That is a total affront.
Well,
On
that's
what
fine.
basis do you accuse me of being pro-development?
Well, I've had a number of discussions with you where you've talked about how because of the budget shortfall continuing out, we should be,
I have
No,
never made a
property.
statement like that, ever.
well,
Nor do I consider development for a budget purpose.
well, good. It's good to know. I still wouldn't support Nancy on the committee.
So again, I think that's.
By the
fine.
way, nor do I think you stack a committee to say some people represent X and some people represent Y.
I don't think
Hopefully,
we should
everybody
either.
in this village works for the village on a volunteer basis out of the good for the village, not for their own personal agenda.
Okay, thank you. Any other committee reports? Okay, next we're going to move to Police Department. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I'll be happy to, everybody should have received a copy of my monthly report. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Sounds like Councilman Steinbrink covered maybe a couple items I was going to go ahead and mention about some of the grant purchases with the body cameras and the dash cams. So I don't think I need to get into that at all, but happy to answer any questions.
Chief, I've gone down this year compared to last. I don't know why that would be. I wonder if you did. And I wondered how many of the speeding tickets now were being given on Mayfield Road.
I don't have all that information in front of me. I do know that February is obvious. The winter months obviously playing that.
Okay.
We also had a police officer who was out of service for 2 months. There was a contribution there as well. But, I've seen this before. Winter months, things slow down, then things have a sense to pick back up. It just depends on what we have going on sometimes too. So.
I would like to know at some point how many were on Mayfield Road.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can track that. Thank you.
Chief, maybe just one comment. If you could maybe talk a little bit about the safety fund and maybe give a little bit of a free plug or an advertisement that, again, I know we've talked about this in the past, but it's open to donations from residents, and I funded the recent Tesla purchase and some other things. So I think it's something that a lot of villagers may not be aware of.
This I think it just kind of came about, I'm going to say about a year and a half ago, maybe, Mayor. I mean, we started having a discussion about it. I mean, oftentimes, I receive a call, just interaction with a resident, when I'm out on the road, whatever the case might be, and they'd always ask, what can we do? What can we do to help out and whatnot? So, didn't really have the right answer for them or any answer at that point. So I know the mayor and I started having some discussions about that. And I think years ago, there might have been a couple of funds and, kind of went away and whatnot. So we talked about, maybe creating a safety fund and all of that money that, residents would feel they want to go ahead and, contribute to, could be used to offset, purchases in not only the police department, but the fire department and whatever else, might come up, we might think would be a worthwhile purchase. So.
And it's tax, make it out to the village and it's tax deductible. Any other questions? Ed?
I've been following the news, and I guess the legislation went through in the state of Ohio to carry without a permit now. And I guess it's either on the governor's desk to be signed or has been signed. I don't know how that's going to affect our village with our laws.
Yeah, that is on the governor's desk. I think it's 205, Senate Bill 205.
House
Bill
Bill
205.
215.
215 is it? Yeah, that's on the governor's desk right now. I don't think there's a lot of questions about that. I mean, I think you can argue both sides to it to some degree. I think most law enforcement, my colleagues have some concerns about it in terms of not necessarily the permitting, we don't think it's much to ask for that if somebody would like to secure a permit or don't have to have a permit to go through some kind of safety training. In theory, anybody can go pass a background check, get a gun, and never handle a gun before and carry it. So that's the concern that I would have and most of my colleagues are having.
So I guess we really don't know at this point.
We don't. It's on the governor's desk.
We don't know what the governor's going to do, but most police departments and organizations, mayors and managers are all against it because it takes away the training with the permitting process. So anybody have one.
Chief, can you tell us about the unicycling competition?
I don't have a whole lot on that. Also, well, this was, I'm gonna say maybe about 2 months ago, so this is it's a national, it's the North American Unicycling Competition. It's national. And this North American Unicycle Competition, it's all around, they move the venues around. Ohio was selected this year. And they had reached out to us asking if we would be interested in being one of the host locations down here in Gates Mills because of the scenery and whatnot. And I know Notre Dame's in Chardon, there's going to be a site there too. It's 5 days. What we're looking at doing down here, we just talked about this today. Tom and I have a recommendation for the group that we're going to be meeting with probably next month to finalize the course. What we're looking at is about 2 hours. These are professional riders. It's nothing that we can't handle. And we think it'll be some good optics for Gates Mills. We'll get very professional riders. It's going to be on a Wednesday during the day, I believe, roughly between 8 and 12, but that'll include the setup, the registration, the setup, the breakdown, and whatnot. So all in about 4 hours, very professionally run organization. And we're actually just trying to schedule a second meeting with them before the next council. So we're hoping to receive confirmation with them on that.
It sounds like it's very interesting and it's kind of user friendly, so our residents can watch and I think it'll be a nice event.
Yeah, our talk, for those of you who may or may not remember, but we had a 5K road race down here years ago. We're looking at that same course. So basically we'd start in front, somewhere in this area on River Road, and we'll go down to Epping, to River Road, back up Berkshire, come back on Epping Road and back. So that, there and back, you total 6.2 miles, and that's what they need. It's a 10K race.
So it sounds like fun.
You're gonna make them do the big hill.
Well,
Yeah,
they assured us they could handle it, but I don't know if we're gonna go that far. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
One more question for Chief, if I may. I see in here that there's, in your report, Chief, that Amazon and FedEx packages have been disappearing, and I know a lot of us get checks and other important things in those packages. Any advice for residents on, what to look out for?
Well, not only we had a few in these particular cases, they were not our residents. We believe they were, stolen porch pirates elsewhere and goods dropped off here in Gates Mills in the ditches. However, what we have seen down here just recently is we've had an Old Mill resident, in fact, have iPhones delivered to his house he did not order. So we believe there's some identity theft going on there. Chester Township has a case, exact same iPhone, exact same date. So we're working with them on that. So we're going to see what happens. This has been, it's pretty widespread. I mean, Mayfield Heights has seen a lot of this here right now. So I would just remind everybody, always check your credit reports, keep an eye on your credit cards, do all that, because, that's what we're expecting to have happen. Now, this resident here on Old Mill has not received any notices yet that he's a victim, but we're expecting that to happen. So we do believe he's going to be, show up on his credit report probably in the next couple of weeks. So that's all around though. It's pretty widespread right now.
Any more questions? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Next is Service Department. Dave?
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. You should have received a copy of my monthly report. I'm happy to answer any questions you might.
I have one question, Dave. Are those poles being delivered down?
Yes, there could be a few more issues with them yet, so we're trying to work through that.
Oh,
right now.
I thought we were going to get lucky.
Stay tuned.
Any other questions for Dave?
Our gasoline storage tanks, are they topped off?
We did diesel. Yeah. And I'll check with the mechanic. I know he was looking at them today.
I was wondering if there is a terrific shortage, if there's any kind of a program the village could put in place to help our residents out with, enough for them to get to the drugstore and back.
Well, we don't
some
have
type of
regular
basis.
gasoline, do we? Do we?
Yeah, there's 2 pumps down there. something.
I don't know that we. We'll have to deal with that as it happens. Yeah. Okay,
All right, that concludes my report.
you want to introduce?
Yes, certainly. So Chris Courtney, our village engineer, I think from time to time, Chip has mentioned one of the road assessment programs that we started looking at, what was it, in the fall, I think? And so he has a brief presentation for you to talk about the road assessment program.
I just need technology fired up, which will be coming here in 1 second. I'm hoping that the excitement level of this presentation comes somewhere between swearing in of a new police lieutenant and discussion on unicycle contest. So my hope is that you're not disappointed. I'll talk for about 5 minutes. It's a brief video from the gentleman who's the president of the company that we subcontracted to do some pavement assessment work that I'll get into in more detail in the presentation. And then there'll be time for some questions. I'll try to raise the intelligence level in the room a little bit about pavement management, and then provide an opportunity to answer any questions. So what we're going to talk about is pavement management. If you didn't notice the pun on the first slide, using technology to drive better decisions with respect to pavement management. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So what we've always struggled with historically is how to best assess roadways, what system to use, who's going to go out and look at it, at what point in time of the year do we do that? And as you can imagine, there's a lot of variables that go into it. It could be as different as just the person that's looking at the road on a given day. It would be enough to create slightly different results. So we've been looking for a solution that would allow us to get true apple to apple comparison of roadways in the village. And we found this, these folks down in Columbus called the Pavement Management Group, or PMG, that uses high-def video and a lot of post-processing artificial intelligence-driven assessment tools to rank the condition of pavements. So in putting this to use, the spreadsheets that you see here are kind of some samples of the system that we've used historically. A lot of spreadsheets and tracking documents that we've built internally and used, but we're now going to be moving into more of a much more robust, comprehensive type system. So it'll give us our apples to apples consistency. It'll allow us through better reporting and graphics to take some of the mystery and mysticism out of the whole pavement assessment process and what we're doing. It's going to allow me the opportunity to present a lot better graphic material and reporting to council. And ultimately, if you look at our road system village-wide, it's got a certain pavement condition index, or PCI, associated with it. The pilot project we did, it came in at 53.1 out of 100. Our goal over time is to spend money as intelligently as we can to raise that pavement condition index for the village to a highest level as possible. So we're trying to spend intelligently, make our roadways last, and improve the condition of the village roadways. We'll go to the next slide. So when we look at a pavement management program, we look at, once a new pavement goes in, what is the right point in time in order to utilize those different maintenance and reconstruction techniques, from surface treatments like reclamite all the way through a full reconstruction of the pavement. So we're looking to lay out that life cycle of the pavement and then determine what we're going to do to make it last as long as possible before we have to get in there and completely rebuild it. So what will the process look like? We've got pavement management group that's set to do the rest of the roadway assessment within the next couple of weeks, which we'll be getting the information for that. We then look at an overall village pavement condition index. We prioritize our work based on those roads that are in worse condition, or conversely, those roads that are in the best condition that we want to do maintenance activities on to extend their lives out as long as possible. We develop a 2-year, 5-year road program that's going to look at addressing those things, both from a reconstruction and maintenance standpoint over the next 2 years and 5 years. Talk about budgeting and financing here at council. with the administration. We build projects and then we update that on an annual basis. And then in the 2 to 3 year time frame, we have payment management group come back in and redo the video and assessment. Again, looking at another 2 to 3 years, another assessment. And then what it gives us the ability to do after we get through about 3 cycles is we can start to build a predictive model of how our pavements are going to deteriorate over time, given the conditions we have here in the village, based on how rapidly we're watching their pavement condition index decrease. So we did a pilot project for a couple $1,000s. We had pavement management group come in and do about 6 miles of roadway, where they came in and they did the video, they did the full pavement condition indexing, they collected all the data. And this was the very, very brief report that they submitted. Shows a variety of data, shows length, width, square footage of pavement area, the pavement condition index, the type of pavement, percentage of cracks that look like they're going from the top down versus the bottom up, which is important. And then tabulates everything in very digestible form. So with this, we can go ahead and start the video real quick where James Goldman talks about their process. So as you can see, there's a lot of really neat bells and whistles that come along with it. And I think that the way that it can be used is just limited by whoever's imagination is thinking about how they might be able to use it. If Dave gets a phone call about a ditch problem, he can go look at a video. I can look at a video. Got access in almost real time with great information throughout the village. So at the end of this program, what do we hope to do? Again, spend money as efficiently as possible to get our roads to be as good as they can be for as long as possible before we have to reconstruct them. So the use of this system is going to provide us with a much more robust platform, a lot more information to make well-informed decisions supported by data about how we're going to maintain and reconstruct the roadways in the village. So I'm really excited about it. If there's any questions, I can certainly field those, but I thank everybody for your attention and for putting up with a peek behind the engineering curtain for a few minutes.
Chris, how often do they update the videos?
Recommendation out of the gate would be every 2 to 3 years.
Just as an aside, the cost of this whole project is what, $11,000?
$11,000
I
for
mean, if we
all the
wanted to do
streets
it
in the
once a
village.
year, we certainly could. It's just that they're recommending more, so, more, or longer.
Chip, this saves you having to walk the roads to detect the condition, right?
Well, I would like
Told us
actually,
about.
I would like to comment on that. So when I was first asked to head up the safety committee, I'm not the safety, the service committee, I decided, well, I solicited and got volunteers representing different geographies of the village. I think there were 7 on the committee, and they each were given an assignment of the roads in their neighborhoods. And I asked them to go and drive the roads and come back with what they thought were the worst condition and you know, in some sort of order. One of the 7 didn't see the word drive, and he walked, he practically walked in with a whole new pair of shoes because he walked the whole thing. But, and you know, it didn't amount to a lot. You know, we all see cracks on the road. Okay. So we see some potholes. Okay. That's important. So then we tried the service department, which they do anyways. They're out on the roads a lot, particularly when they're snow plowing. We asked the police that are out on the roads. Chris is on the roads all the time. And even this past summer, as you're aware, we did an evaluation of the village engineer function. And we interviewed 2 other engineering firms to, you know, sort of the equivalent of an RFQ to see if we were had the right village engineer or whether there might even be somebody that could even be better. First of all, as you might recall, we concluded that absolutely we have as good an engineer as we could get. Chris does a wonderful job and particularly suited for a village like Gates Mills. But one of the things we kept challenging was how do these other engineers assess roads? And exactly the same way Chris does. If you wanted more detail, we could pay Chris more money. We could hire another engineering firm to go in and walk the roads. But I can assure you for $11,000, you can't get better than this. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to be robots and just accept everything as we prioritize. We'll, you know, they'll go out and look now, oh, this has highlighted something we might not have seen. So and so I'm thinking we may want to crank the service committee back up once we get a sense of priority and just maybe get some input. There could be some economic decisions here. You know, it's always the challenge. How much do you keep throwing Band-Aids versus how much do you do a reconstruction? You do have different roads that have different traffic volume. Certainly a road that has 4 houses on it that dead ends and the only traffic is going back and forth other than your Amazon truck, you know, probably doesn't need to be taken down to the studs every time, but you know, some are high volume. So what this does to budget for the next 2 to 3 to 5 years, we'll be a lot more educated. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good question.
Any other questions?
Yeah. That was a good picture of my mailbox when I'm flying by, but I've noticed in the village, and I don't know if there's a problem or not, when we've patched and we've cut into the roads and we've put the new patches down on the bad spots, you know, instead of having to do the whole road, those seem to be shrinking. And I was wondering if somebody could look at that.
I'll look at it. If you have any specific locations, please let me know.
Well,
Otherwise,
there's one right in front of my house, but I looked at, they're all over the village. It looks, I mean, there's like gaps and it's shrinking back and it's gonna.
It's probably just freeze thaw with cold weather. I would expect them to close back up a little bit when the weather gets warmer, but they probably need
They,
cracks.
they could get dangerous, especially if you get a motorcycle tire or something wedged in those things, they'll flip you. And it looks like the same technology of the asphalt is not the same that's on the road and it's pulling back.
I will look at it.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Lori?
Thanks, Chris. Two questions. One is who owns the data that they collect? Is the village own that?
We do, and then we have a part of the $11,000 is $1,000 annual subscription for access to the
For
data
access.
using their system.
Okay. And then do you think 2 to 3 years updates is enough to keep it current enough?
Well, if we get it done, roads only weather, useful life of a roadway is 20 to 30 years. And, I don't want to micromanage it and get in there every year and assess it. It makes sense to me to get it done, have a couple years worth of work that's completed to upgrade a portion of the system, then get it done again, see how quickly the untreated roads are deteriorating, and then how the new roads bring that average up. So it seems like the right interval. I've talked with a number of other engineers that utilize this as well. And that's seems to be the interval that they're most comfortable with.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Next is Fire Department. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. I don't have a video. It's just going to be me.
Ooh.
You should have received a copy of the fire department report for February, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Without any questions, then let me just remind you that when you change your clocks this coming weekend, to put new batteries in your smoke detectors. That
I
concludes.
much prefer to wait till it goes off at 2 a.m. some later morning. I don't know how they design the smoke detectors to make sure that when the battery goes out, it's 2 a.m., but
Well, it's between 2 and 4. No.
Any other questions?
That concludes the fire department report.
Thank you, Chief. Moving on to, I'm going to, for the law directors, I got to move 13 and 14 up and move 12 down so that we can get our housekeeping done before the law director has to leave. So next is ordinance number 2022-8. Sandra?
An ordinance to approve current replacement pages to the Gates Mills codified ordinances. We do this periodically when there are changes in state regulations or when council makes changes. They are updated and replaced. So periodically, is it every 6 months or a year?
We usually do it annually.
Annually, we'll get an update. And I think a couple of council members received the new update pages to replace in their book, or it's accessible online, either way. So I move to approve.
Suspension.
Sandra, are there any substantive changes or is this just housekeeping?
It's housekeeping. It's the traffic laws for the most part that the state changes.
Well, yeah, and I guess wouldn't you say if there was a substantive change that the council made that would get incorporated in this? So it is a housekeeping matter, but what gets changed is anything that's different in state law or things that we as a council change. So they could be minor or major.
Thank you.
It's mostly traffic code issues. And if it's something big, our police chief would let us know.
I think Michael might be alluding to the question as to whether we should be reviewing our charter to update it at some point. It looks pretty antiquated to me. I've read it thoroughly these last couple of weeks, and I think it needs to be updated, clarified, whatever. That's my view. I don't know what.
I think it'd be a good idea to schedule it sometime during the year.
It's a good idea. Charter review is always good.
Well, Todd, don't they need to do a charter review committee by the ballot?
Yes, because we do not have a procedure for that in our code or in our charter. So we need to follow the Ohio Constitution with respect to that. So I can provide that information to you.
Okay, we'll get the information and then we'll come back to you with that.
Thank you.
Good idea. Thank you.
Is there a second?
You
Second,
have to move to suspend,
Suspend.
not approve.
Okay, move to suspend.
Second,
Eton,
Yes.
Allworder,
yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press, Steinbrink.
yes.
Turner,
Yes,
Welsh.
Yes.
move to approve.
Second,
Eton,
Yes.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press,
Yes.
Steinbrink.
yes.
Turner,
Yes,
Welsh.
Yes.
Thank you. Next is resolution number 2022-9. Chip?
This is a resolution expressing the intent of the Village of Gates Mills in 2022 to sell by internet auction personal property, including motor vehicles and other property referenced in Ohio Revised Code 721-15, which is no longer needed for public use or is obsolete or unfit for the use for which it was acquired, authorizing govdeals.com Inc. to perform the sales and authorizing the sale of specific personal property by internet auction. And as you might have noticed, detailed in the motion is, or in the resolution is, this is the 2003 Ford F-250 flatbed truck. The write-up says with snowplow and the VIN number. It doesn't say that the speedometer doesn't work and the instrument panel is dark, but, and other aspects of it. The second vehicle is the village's 2006 Ford F-550 dump truck with snowplow and steel salt spreader. Dave Biggert feels that that may actually be some value. The flatbed truck probably is worth parts, but maybe not a whole lot more. But the website is, sometimes we get interest, but this is a further way of trying to see if we can get the best deals we can for this.
I'll second.
Chip,
Do I need to declare an emergency or is this, suspend the rules or?
Needs to be a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule. if we're
Oh,
going to
yeah,
pass this.
Dave, do you need this to get going right now?
Not necessarily. I mean, there's going to be the time period for the bidding and whatnot. So the sooner we put it up there, the sooner we get it sold.
So should we suspend the rules so he can get going, so he doesn't have to wait 3 readings?
I'll second that. I think that given where the used car market is now,
Good time to take advantage.
Yep.
Eton,
Yes.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
yes.
Press,
Yes.
Steinbrink,
yes.
Turner,
yes,
Welsh.
Yes.
And now I move to approve resolution 2022-9.
Second.
Eton,
wait a minute.
I had a question.
I'm sorry.
For- Just for Chip, sorry, just for a little background on gov deals and, how that works. And is this pretty typical? Have we done it before and had good success with it? Just to get a little background would be helpful.
This will be
Okay.
the first time as far as a service vehicle. I know the fire chief did sell, I don't know if it was last year, he did sell the, what was it, 1411, the one fire truck through it. And it seemed to, I think initially there didn't meet the low bid or something, but ultimately it worked out fine. So this will be, my first experience, but I thought let's try and give it a try and see where it goes.
Council member, most communities that I'm aware of use govdeals.com. And they do seem to do a very good job.
That works and there's no warranty or other issues for
No.
us or, okay, great.
Sell as is.
I'm sure as typically we do, Todd will, let me know, but typically when they pick it up, we make them sign an agreement that says as is, no guarantee, no, we've always done that with everything, that we've sold. So I'm sure that's going to be no different in this case.
Perfect. Thank you.
So the motion made by Chip and seconded by Ed. Eton,
Yes.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press,
Yes.
Steinbrink.
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Welsh.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go back up to number 12. Motion to approve membership for the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Group. Sandra.
I move to approve the membership of the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Group. Is there a second?
Second.
Should
So-
we have some discussion?
Absolutely. That's what I needed. I needed the move and have a second. And I imagine most of the audience who are still here are here for this topic about the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee. I don't think you're here for the unicycle information, right? All right, good, good. Welcome. We're really glad that you're here. And I look forward to providing some background. Recently, two of our council members have raised some issues about the selection process for advisory committee members. So I want to answer that, that question and concern. But for the benefit of the audience, I want to give a little bit of background information as well, kind of leading up to this point. So at the beginning, I'd like to just extend my appreciation to Chip Allwater and to the mayor for working together on this process. We probably put in at least 100, 110, 20 hours with outreach activities to residents, reviewing information that we received from residents who are interested in serving, following up with them to confirm, their interest. And I would say it's been a delightful experience. We've had exchanges with over 120 residents of the village, and we've just been so overwhelmed by the enthusiasm, the excitement, the energy that people have shown to participate in this comprehensive plan. So that's just been a real pleasure. To recap, this whole comprehensive planning process began in June through September of 2019, when a group of individuals selected the vendor to lead the process. And that vendor is CT Consultants. Members of that selection committee were David Atten, Chip Allwater, Nat Smith, Nancy Sogg, Craig Steinbrink, and myself. Once a vendor was selected, October of 19 through about January of 2020, so just a couple of months, the idea of a comprehensive plan was socialized among the residents. Those of us who are on the selection committee talked about it. It came up at the January 2020 council meeting, and it was approved. And we began in earnest to think about solicitation of participants. What happened was COVID hit. And it really put everything on the back burner. Our consultant advised us that this really was a face-to-face process to get together with neighbors and talk about issues related to the future of the village was much more meaningful to do in person. And we really weren't as expert in Zoom as we are today in 2021. So it was really kind of on the shelf until October of 2021, when it came back to council, and we did approve, we reapproved, recommitted our contract with CT Consultants. So September, December, January, and February council meetings, we reminded everyone of the ongoing process. In November, especially, the mayor encouraged all who were nominated or self-referred at that point to confirm their interest in participating. There were articles in the pink sheet, information on the website, some articles in the Chagrin Valley Times. And that's basically how volunteers came forward. They either self-identified, send us emails, or they were recommended by a neighbor or a council member. Some of these were names that came up back in 2019 when the process first started. The mayor actually saved those, and those were part of the stack of residents that we reviewed. So what did we do then with all that information? And I have to say that we did we did deal with everyone who was recommended. And so as we sat there, we talked with Hopkins. I know Chris Hooks. Chris Hopkins, our consultant, and talked with her about criteria for selection. Now, she did not give us the criteria. We reviewed it with her, but every community is different. We don't have much commercial activity here. We don't have malls and plazas. So the type of criteria that we might use here in the village could be different from other communities that she works with. So the first thing we looked at was skills. What career experience did individuals have to bring to the table? Some examples of that were urban planning, finance, board membership, law, or environmental conservation, preservation. We thought those were, relevant areas for the Comprehensive Process Advisory Committee. The second that we looked at was community leadership, individuals who represented organizations like the Gates Mills Land Conservancy, the Hunt Club, the Garden Club, the Improvement Society. But then we got to thinking that if we had individuals solely with a long-term experience in serving the village, we probably weren't going to be getting input from individuals who were newer to the village, came here for new reasons as opposed to reasons from many years ago. And we thought that it would be important to have a balance, again, of people who were pretty steeped in the village and those who were newer. Residency, short and long-term residency, as same thing as perspectives from new individuals could be quite varied compared to those who had been here for a longer period of time. Age was also a consideration. We wanted to include both youth and seniority. Gender was very important to us, and geography. Where did you live in the village? And Karen, I don't know if you didn't bring the map over. No, I think it is important. I think it is important to see the map because again, we had several committees. With Chris's help, we came up with an advisory group, neighborhood outreach committee, outside perspectives, PR and communications, and then key interviewees, people. And this was in the letter that went out to everyone in the village. So again, in looking over the names and looking for the criteria, sometimes you'd find an individual. Let me say it a different way. When you take all of that into account, and Chris really advised that we have about 20 people on the advisory committee. We struggled with that and ended up with 27 people. Hopefully she'll be able to manage that size group. But in looking at it, you're not going to exactly have 13 women and 13 men. You're not going to exactly have what would it be? 14 people that live on the north side and 13 people who live on the south side. We had to look at criteria again in a multifaceted way. And in the process of doing that, and again looking at the map, and Karen had different color-coded stickies for each of the different committees. We felt like we had done a really good job in identifying candidates who were willing to serve. The other thing that I would say is that when we talk to individuals, it never dawned on Chip and me that we were sorting for people with particular, interests or personal motivations. I think we approach this from the perspective that, these are volunteers who want to give back to the community, and they're looking out for the benefit of the community. Do people have conflict of interest? Sure. Conflicts of interest exist all the time. They're not illegal, and they're not improper. So again, we took this from the perspective of these are folks who want to contribute to their community. I know that some of you. Well, I'm gonna maybe stop at that point, and that's.
Could I just add one?
Yeah, if you like.
One thing. When we talked to the consultant about some of the dilemmas we were having. We have a number of residents that have served in leadership capacities in the past and in various roles and bring a long history. And we talked about that, and she steered us away from that to some extent. She said, what you want to try to avoid on a committee, on an advisory committee like this, is somebody saying, oh yeah, we tried that 20 years ago and it never really worked. We don't want that kind of bias in today's world. So, and that's not to say that, some of those people might or might not have done that, but that was one of the major reasons we set up this, I don't know, what did we call it? The other interviews, the key people, and that, again, the consultant had originally wanted to limit interviews to, I think, 25 or 30 people independent of the, including the advisory committee. And we expanded that by 15 or 20 interviews. Those are in-depth 30 to 45-minute interviews. And she's starting those in the next couple of weeks with, I think it's a total of 17 of those key interviews of people that have a lot of history with the village and a lot of thoughts. The other thing that the consultant said was all of the advisory committee meetings are open meetings. I hope that we get a crowd at least this large, if not larger than this, listening to the advisory committee deliberations. The process is the consultant brings a lot of data, a lot of information. If you've been reading what we've been sending out, there will be a very detailed questionnaire going out to all villagers. There will be some focus groups. There will be some town hall meetings. So there will be a lot of, and hopefully people that show up at the advisory committee and listen will have some comments to suggest. She's setting up, I believe, I don't know, some sort of email or some way for any villager to communicate, this is something I heard and I have thoughts about this or that. So, one thing we learned way back in the selection process was that when you're done with the process, if in our case, any resident stands up and says, gee whiz, I didn't know what was going on, or I didn't have a chance to get any input, then what did we do wrong? As opposed to, I'm sorry, but I don't know what rock you were living under, because we're trying to every way possible to communicate this is going on, and we hope we get input from anybody and everybody. So it's not that somebody that's not on the advisory committee isn't going to have a chance to bring forth comments, and they may well be able to come forth. Some of those people with a lot of that experience will certainly be able to say, gee, that's interesting. You tried that. We tried it before, and maybe this is something you need to consider. But anyways, I just wanted to add that dimension.
Thank you. The last comment I'll make, because you may have questions about this too, is that Chip and I were appointed by the mayor and tasked with being the co-project managers for the comprehensive plan. It's always been the practice in the village that appointees by the mayor stood and you did your job. It actually was pointed out by David in the charter that it says all committees have to be approved by the council. Now we've gotten some legal opinion that our charter is very, very complex and that this could kind of go either way in terms of having to be voted or not. But we thought it best in light of that information to really come forward, provide this background and bring it to council for any kind of questions and then a vote. I am sensitive about the fact that I do not want to get in a discussion about individuals on the advisory committee. We never said to individuals that we would be forwarding their names to be voted on by council and discussed in a public body. So what I guess I am asking for is questions, comments, thoughts from the audience, and then either approval or non-approval of the process that we undertook to make these selections. So questions, comments from council?
Could I make some comments to begin with?
Absolutely.
It'll take a couple of minutes, but first of all, I want to congratulate you and Chip and the mayor for all the work you put into this thing. I know how difficult choosing small groups from large applicants, large groups of applicants is extremely difficult. And you've done that. The other thing I want to compliment you on is erring on the side of transparency by allowing a discussion and a vote on the composition of this committee. I realize the charter was a little ambiguous, but I congratulate you for erring on the side of transparency. And I think this is a very important meeting in that pursuit. Just backing up a little bit, on February the 8th, the last council meeting we had, we were presented with a list of people in 4 very neat columns, maybe 5, I forget, 4. We were told that's it. This is what's going to happen. And I didn't enjoy that. I thought we ought to talk about it, which we are doing. And my view of lists is as follows. I don't need to look at the names except to find out as much information about the people as I can from public information, not by chatting to people or gossiping. My wife aside, that is. I mean, I do live with my wife, so we talk about this quite a lot. But all the other people, all I did with my wife's help was to look at what these people do in life and where they live. It was that simple. I have no criticism of any of the individuals. I don't know half of them. So the thing that we noticed, and I'll pass out an exhibit that we prepared, if you give everybody a copy of that. Over there. In this village, we have Mayfield Road conveniently cuts our population exactly in half. There are as many people north of Mayfield Road as there are south. But the character, the aspirations of those people north in general and south in general are quite different. And so I think we have to bear in mind that we have 2 different sets of sensibilities in this village. One that's predominantly south, one that's predominantly north. So the first check we did was what proportion of these people are from the north or from the south of the village, again, using Mayfield Road as the delineation. And it wasn't to my surprise, but to my disappointment, the proportion of people south of Mayfield Road was higher than the 50-50 that I was hoping it would be. And as we progress from left to right in this exhibit, you'll see Precinct A is entirely south of Mayfield. Precinct B is essentially north of Mayfield. And if you look across the page, we've got the total at the bottom of the 4th column, 75 total volunteers here, of which 51% or 2/3, 51 or 2/3 live south and 1/3 live north. And that ratio gets progressively more southern as you move across the page from the advisory committee to the other committees. And in my own mind, I think one test you should do when you do screening and to select people, you should stand back and say, okay, this is the group we've assembled. Does it look right? The criteria could be fantastic, but it might lead you to unintentional structure that you find undesirable. So the north-south distinction, which to me is an important cultural issue in this village, is one that I think this committee should reflect. And right now it's not balanced, nor the other committees. The second thing we noticed was that there are 2 prominent landowners. There are 2 prominent landowners whose families own almost 200 acres between Brigham, Sherman, west of County Line. That's a massive amount of land that is eminently developable, not entirely, but largely, we think. Again, this is from public information. I haven't spoken to any of these people at all. And I believe that in the course of this process, those 2 families, represented by 2 people on this committee, will have too much upside potential. And to me, that reflects a possible conflict of interest, certainly a perception of conflict of interest. And although conflicts of interest are in some cases illegal, I think the perception of conflict of interest in this particular effort is bad for the process. I think this process will depend on its integrity in terms of its discipline and its even-handedness. And I think this is a poor start to that process. So I'm of the view that the lists are, to me at least, not acceptable. I don't know how many candidates there were. I've heard about the screening criteria. I haven't seen how they were applied. So I don't really know how this list arose. I heard all this before over the last 3 months, but I don't like the way the list is configured in terms of its overall mix. Another thing about lists that's very important is who isn't on the list. And I was surprised that although the Chagrin River Watershed Group is represented on the advisory committee, I was surprised that the metro parks weren't talked about, Gilmore, Mayfield City Schools, because they are a resident in the village. I'm not talking about the external committee. I'm talking about the fact that they work and live in this village and they're our neighbors. And the same applies to Gilmore. So I wondered why they weren't included. So maybe there was a criterion that was used that said, we're not going to take any of these people onto this committee. I wouldn't understand why. I mean, I think they're important players in this village, in the village life, today and tomorrow. So they're my observations on the list. And I think, although you've done some work, the three of you, to change the structure of the list a little bit from what was presented on February the 8th, I'm still personally dissatisfied with it because I'm not happy with the balance, north and south, or with the potential, certainly appearance of a conflict of interest with two of the members. So that's they're my views on the list themselves. And I think Michael has some observations on the process.
I do actually have some observation on the process. I think we put the cart before the horse. The membership of the committee had been distributed to every resident in the village before it had the benefit of any discussion at council whatsoever or any approval by council, which is required by the charter. So I think we need to do better in the future. This is the most important committee that we're going to see in the next 10 years. It's going to have a big impact on the future. It should have been discussed at council. It should have been voted on before it was distributed.
I think finally, as I said a moment ago, the value of this plan will depend entirely on the extent of participation by the villagers. And I think they will participate more enthusiastically if they believe that the process is unbiased and straightforward. And at the moment, I have a feeling that people are not that confident about that. So the process itself has got to be a strong, sustained process. Otherwise, the product will be useless. And I'd hate to think that we spend almost $60,000 on this, plus endless hours of volunteer time, and finish up with a product that lacks value because it lacks credibility. And I think the other thing I'm most interested in is that the quality of this process is crucial, and the pace is not. This is not an urgent matter. We didn't have a master plan for 25 years, and we've had to delay it for 2 further years. And I think rushing this thing in the face of, we have no timetable for this thing. I have not seen what I would call a project plan laid out for this process. And I think we've got to be ready to go before we go. And I think we're starting prematurely. I think that this has been done in a rush, the decision-making, and I worry that that's going to jeopardize the integrity of the process.
I appreciate your comments, and I trust that they come from a very thoughtful place.
Absolutely.
Let me just factually, let me just make a couple of comments, and one is that a timeline that takes us through the first half of the year is in the letter that went home to the mayor. There are 27 people on the advisory committee, and they do represent, as you said, 42% to 58% south to north. I guess personally, I question the north-south designation. I know that that is a criteria, and we did use it. But when I think about this council, we represent everybody in the village. We don't have north representatives and south representatives. And one of my fears about, kind of pushing that too hard, so to speak, may be to create an unnatural division that may not exist. I know you've gone to neighbors and talked to people, and obviously they listen. They're here tonight. I've talked during the time that I was campaigning with people that live south of Mayfield, but they're over on Somme, and they feel likewise that they are perhaps on the outskirts of what's happening. So at any given time, people can feel isolated, and I always take the tack of, what can I do to get you involved? I don't try to create more conflict. And I'm not saying that that's what you're doing. This is a reasoned discussion that we're having. To your point, Michael, we did promote it to the village because, as I said a moment ago, it was our understanding that the mayoral committee stood, and we were it was perfectly acceptable to communicate that. So, this is kind of an update of that step that we took.
Can I just respond to that? The north-south distinction is a proxy for a more fundamental problem in this village. My view, after 25 years of really not being heavily involved in the village, but observing it, and being quite heavily involved in the last 3 years, is that there are two groups of people broadly in this village. There are those who believe that they have great influence over the way the village is run, and there are those who know they don't. And I think the north-south is a proxy for that. It's an approximation. This thing is too emotional to be precise about. But I think there are, in a sense, two classes of people in this village. That's the perception. And I think this planning process, if it doesn't recognize that and deal with it, it's going to be a failure.
I just want to make a couple of quick comments. All good points. I think this is a great analysis. And, perhaps an oversight. I kind of look at this as we all live in the same village, and whether someone's on Brigham Road or someone lives on County Line, they all want pretty much the same thing in the village, and they pretty much all moved here for generally the same reasons. I'd be interested to see this analysis on age and demographics and background. So
well, hang on.
So hold on, just let me.
We've got demographics. I don't know what background means.
I want to finish. So that's number one. I said number two is I think we need to pick our words very, very carefully, because effectively what you're insinuating is that this whole master plan process is about land use. And you have 2 out of 27 people who you claim own, 200 or 185 acres of contiguous land. And your assumption is that they're for developing that land. And so I just think we need to be very careful in choosing our words. Words have an impact. There's, we can go back in this village 30 years over words that have been said that have broken up friendships and everything else, prior mayoral appointments and everything else. So I just think we need to be very careful in terms of what we're saying, because this master plan is about more than land use. That's a piece of it, but I just want to make sure we're choosing our words carefully and not inadvertently making assumptions and accusations.
I didn't say it was about land use. I didn't say it was about land use. I didn't say the 2 owners of the 185 acres were into development. I don't know. All I'm saying is that there is a perception.
You're making the assumption that they are.
No, I'm not making that assumption. I said it's a reasonable assumption to make from public information. It's a reasonable assumption to make. And therefore there is the perception of conflict of interest. Certainly in my head.
I'd like to make a comment on these statistics, because you can make statistics look any way you want.
These are pretty simple.
Yeah, they're too simple. The advisory committee is, Sandra listed all of the different factors that we looked at. There are 5 members that are members of the Land Conservancy. I don't even know, looking at the list, whether they're north or south. That wasn't even remotely an issue. There are, I think, 5 people that had various leadership positions in various organizations. I have no idea whether they're north or south. There are some skills on here, second to none. Can't believe some of the skills we got on here. I have no idea where they're from. Didn't pay any attention to that. So then when you're all done, you add it up and say, oh my gosh, it's 15 to 11. I'm really hard pressed to believe that somebody in Dorchester thinks a lot different than somebody on Riverview. Now, maybe you think that, but I don't happen to pick that up. And secondly, I want to comment on the other committees. The other committees are fact gathering. They are not part of opinion or advisory, okay? They feed information. Every member of those committees, we asked for people to volunteer. Now, and everyone that volunteered is on one of those committees. Or we called them and said, what would you like? You know, this is one of our committees. Would you like that? Would you like that? We haven't finished the neighborhood captains. So that's going to be another, we don't know, because we haven't defined neighborhoods yet. The consultant's going to do that when she gets the data. So to now play that data out, I'm sorry if residents from the north or from the south didn't send in and say, I'd be very interested, despite what, 7 to 8 requests over the last 2 years. I wasn't going to go door to door. I'm sorry, I spent 100 man hours on this myself. So you're adding statistics here as if, and maybe that is a natural bias, but it's, well, I'm so happy we have 100 people volunteering to participate in this. And I'm sorry if somebody said, oh, I can't have you because you happen to live in the south and we have to have people from the north. That wasn't the factor. You just put the data down. It happened to be when it came out. I look at it and say, wow, that is interesting, but it wasn't a factor on these other committees. The advisory, we listed out all the criteria. All the other committees were anybody that volunteered, we tried to find a spot for them, every single one.
So you're saying you got 75 volunteers, is that what you're saying? I know the communication was largely through the pink sheet, and most people that I know don't read the pink sheet to know what's going on. It's a lengthy document. It's full of stuff that most people aren't particularly interested in, I think, particularly a lot of the people I know. And it's a weak form of communication. It goes to everybody, I understand that, but one day we ought to find out how many people actually read it. So I wonder also how many volunteers you had altogether. And a volunteer sometimes needs some persuasion. I'd be prepared to put some time in to go to the north and find people and ask them if would they like to volunteer. Some people I spoke to this last weekend told me they didn't really know what was going on. How were they supposed to know? Was it by reading the pink sheet?
Well, the council meetings have been recorded and live streamed. There were articles in the Chagrin Valley Times. We have information on the website. There were articles in the pink sheet and in the mayor's letter. I don't know what else we can do.
Well, I'm just saying, it's not surprising to me that
Oh, the letter.
Sorry. We've been sending it in the State of the Village since 2019, when all of it started.
I think I think north-south isn't probably the best way to think about this. I think David was onto something when he said the real divide that is perceived to exist, and I believe it exists, is there's a group of people who believe that they are highly influential in what goes on in the village, and there's a big group of people who believe that they don't matter and they're not influential. I certainly picked that up in campaigning for office, and quite frankly, I'm certain I was elected by the group that believes they're disenfranchised.
that is absolutely true. I mean, in the election in November, Press and I, we had most of our votes from precinct B. The other 4 candidates had most of their votes from precinct A. That's just a fact. And to me, my campaign was aimed at the people who felt disenfranchised, and it showed in the election.
Don't forget, and I know the advisory group is an important part of the overall comprehensive plan. But, you know, where the information is coming from, as Chip said, is from the surveys, and there'll be one per adult. So it's not just one per household, it's one per adult. We still have to figure out how that's gonna exactly happen. We don't want Sharon to take both of them.
So I'll
and
get
you
two
don't-
in my
And you
house.
don't have a chance to give your input. We're getting information, as you know, from realtors, you know, and relocation groups to get perspective on the village from other sources. That's really the data. You know, the advisory committee isn't making up data or giving their opinion per se. They're dealing with the information that's coming in from these other sources and from the interviews that Chris is going to be doing. She already started to schedule interviews with our key interviewees. And then secondly, she'll do all members of the advisory committee. So they do have a chance to give their input. But the bulk of the data is coming from our residents and from outside perspectives, and then back into the neighborhood for discussion through the neighborhood outreach. So, you know, it is complex. And I would admit that, you know, we are evolving. You know, when I just said we're figuring out how everybody is going to get a survey, we're working on that with, you know, with Chris. How do you make sure that everybody gets one, but one person doesn't fill out 15? We've never done this before, and we have a consultant who's helping us, but this has never been done in the village before. So
Right.
we're kind of all growing and learning and
That's fine.
progressing.
That's fine.
And you know, hopefully we're going to establish some trust among us, because that's really going to be the basis of this being successful or not,
No question,
you know?
no question.
Any other
Yeah.
questions, Lori?
Yeah, just a couple of comments, David. So again, I do think it's helpful to take a step back and kind of look at kind of the impact analysis of, you know, what the process has led to. But we did follow a good process, and we tried, Sandra, you know, the mayor tried extremely hard to involve people, and it is a volunteer committee, so you can't make people from one group or another participate if they're too busy or they don't have the time. But it is good to take a step back and look. And if we have an issue with people feeling either that they're influencers or that they're not able to have a voice or influence, it's a little bit of a separate problem that needs to be addressed, maybe part of this process, but separately. As I understand the process, Sandra and Chip, I mean, there's no one who's going to be able to influence. These are broad-based committees. There's a number of different committees. It's going to roll up to recommendations. So I guess I'm hopeful that the process is going to be one in a way that it will be collaborative and there won't be any, you know, outspoken or particular influence that will be able to come through in that process. So that is very important, so that it's balanced as you run it. But if we do have individuals who feel that they're not having a voice, let's get them on these committees. Let's get them in the neighborhood outreach. Sounds like a very important committee. Let's make sure that we've got, I know Sandra, you responded and added a couple of folks to the committee that were recommended that I thought were very good additions. So David, let's go out and find and talk to people and get those folks involved and just make sure that they don't feel that they don't
Well,
have a voice.
Everybody will be involved with the questionnaire, and everybody will have an opportunity to be part of a neighborhood group. I think the engine of this thing is going to be the advisory group, the advisory committee. All the rest is data collection. The advisory committee is the one who's going to be creating one or maybe more than one alternative plan for council to review. And I think it's very important that we have every point of view across the spectrum represented there. So, for example, you talk about backgrounds as being important. What about the guy who ran a car repair shop for 30 years, didn't go to college, very successful businessman, doesn't have a fancy resume, but has a lot to say about the village? I mean, I would talk to him and say, would you like to be a part of the advisory group? He's an illustration. I don't know. I mean, I'd be happy to tramp the streets to find people in the north or of the second category that I'm talking about, who might be very powerful and influential on the advisory committee.
You
That's
can't
all I'm
have
saying.
Everyone can't be on the advisory. committee,
Not everyone, I'm saying everyone.
unfortunately, Right? So the key is that the advisory committee and the process that rolls up to that committee is fair and balanced and gets everybody's input. And when the committee runs its process to come up with
Mhm.
recommendations, we need to make sure that they are running a fair and balanced process and that all those views,
Yeah.
come up into the recommendation.
Well,
that rolled
Let
up.
me interject there that I'm hopeful that everybody on council will be at the advisory meetings and taking it in and participating in it. And the neighborhood committees, for those people that are disenfranchised, they're unbelievably important. This is where they can, get together in small groups in different areas. And there may be some things that are very important to those people in that area. And hopefully they'll be highlighted and brought by whoever is the head of that particular neighborhood group to the advisory committee.
And it
It all
might be
fits into each other.
helpful, and I'm not sure what process you're envisioning, but if that advisory committee is like an open meeting and is a forum and that
Absolutely.
people can come and express their views and opinions and make sure that they get heard and pulled into the process.
Well, and our plan is to have those like these meetings where they would be open and they'd be recorded and live streamed.
I assume that.
We've got an issue with the first one, which we hope will be in April, and that is that the art show is here. So, and we don't have that kind of equipment in the basement. So we're probably going to have to look for another place that we could go, like the regional library, so that we could do that. So that's, we can overcome that.
Just one other comment. I hope we're going to open this to the public before we vote. Is that possible now?
Yeah, we can take
Very
some
good.
questions.
So-
As soon as all of the council questions are answered.
Fine. The original papers from CT Consultants said that the advisory committee should be 20 people plus or minus. And I think correcting balance by adding people is not the right way to do it. You correct the balance by substituting people. Because we've already got I don't know how this committee is actually going to work. But if I find 3 or 4 more people who would love to be on the advisory committee and are probably well equipped to be so on the committee, we'll be up to 30. And I don't know how that all works. So I think what I'm suggesting is that there needs to be some substitution of names, not just addition. But that's up for the bigger group to consider.
Any other questions from council?
I'd like to say something. I've lived in this village for 62 years, and I've never heard of a differentiation between north and south. And I find it a very sad day that we're throwing something out there that gives members of the village one side or the other to pick. I've never heard of north or south.
Well, unfortunately, it's the way we vote. And although it's irrelevant to where you serve, it's a divide where data is available. And the real issue is the cultural issue. It's not north versus south. North-south is a proxy for it in my head and in other people's heads that I've spoken to. So that's all we're saying. North and south, it's not the Civil War. This is about Mayfield Road and the data that's collected by the Board of Elections. So,
Okay.
I would hope you just hear what Beth is saying. I mean, I don't think you have to respond to it. Just hear, it's her opinion.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so council's had questions. Any questions from the audience? Come up to the microphone and state your name and address, please. 2 minutes apiece.
My name is Mark. I live in Brigham, 7400. I'm just gonna say something general. Having put 5 kids through college, including some of the bigger names, there's no more authoritative and less democratic place than our universities. And the way they do that is by limiting free speech limiting words, saying you can't use this word, you can't use that word. We need to, and by saying if you use this word, you're going to offend X, Y, and Z. If we're going to have all these committees, then everybody needs to be free to say what they want to say. And if it's offensive to somebody, just get over it. There are worse things in life. And I think David's, I'm friends with nobody here. I met David because he came to my house, but I think he's taken a lot of crap in the last couple of minutes for saying something which other people disagree with, and it becomes a personal attack on him. And I'm telling you, I've seen this in colleges. You can kill somebody and you'll continue on to the next semester, but if you don't use the proper pronoun, you're out the door. And we can't have that. I mean, there's no sense in having committees if your freedom of speech is limited.
Thank you.
Les Jacobs. I live on Woodstock. So, David, I'm a south of Mayfield person.
I know that's where you live, right?
In listening to what I've heard tonight, and the fact that your advisory committee seems to be overstocked, I have to ask the question for you to consider. I'm not expecting anybody to resolve it tonight, but why do we have so many spouses of people who are already public officials, council members, treasurer, that are have been appointed to the advisory committee? I don't understand why one spokesman per household wouldn't be sufficient to get the range of views that would be appropriate.
Thank you, thank you,
Thank you.
thank you, Les.
Can I respond to that?
I'm going to join you.
Okay.
So will I.
In my,
Since you guys have talked.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, all right,
okay,
No, absolutely.
carry on.
go.
I'm Don McClung, River Road. This is really an observation. I enjoyed very much watching the outside perspective Zoom on the realtors' feedback. I thought that was very interesting. I saw a lot of engagement throughout the group. They came up with some very interesting initial observations. I wanted to kind of just share a couple of those and then ask a question. So the items, for those of you who haven't seen it, I would highly recommend that you take a minute and look at this. But basically, items as they related to the community were broken down into attractions or deterrents, pluses and minuses. And so some of the real obvious stuff percolated to the top. Prestigious community reputation, unanimously viewed as an attraction. Small town atmosphere, historic village ambience, unanimously viewed as an attraction, obviously. Safety, unanimously viewed as an attraction. Shout out to the chiefs. Good job. Where it started to get a little more messy is in issues like housing stock, styles, prices, lot sizes. Much more mixed results. There were both advantages, they were both attractions and deterrents. And interestingly, the same houses, the same prices were both viewed as pluses and minuses, depending on which realtor you were asking. It was pretty interesting. The most interesting point to me was the discussion that related around access. How do we access either amenities or what access do we have? And so there was a question around, is access to or proximity to I-271 is that viewed as an attraction or deterrent? Chris from CT said, we're really focused on measuring only those things that the community can directly impact. Okay, so here's my perspective on that. 18, 19 years ago, when we were searching for where it was we wanted to move, both of us worked either downtown or at University Circle. And so a commute was a very important priority to us. So we got to this ring of a 25-minute commute, and that became a very attractive attraction for us. It prevented us from looking at Hudson, Aurora, Chagrin Falls, all of those. Too far for us to drive. Here's my question about the access to amenities. Also viewed as a minus. We don't have restaurants in town. We don't have coffee shops, and we also don't have affordable housing. Must all of these amenities reside within the village limits if they can easily be accessed 2 miles away from this building? If we can access arts, commerce, and culture via the busiest freeway in the state within 5 minutes. So here's my question. Are we trying to overlay a template of what makes an ideal community? And if so, at what cost? Are we willing to forego the elements that most residents view as key quality of life issues for Gates Mills to add affordable housing, amenities available that I can get to 2 miles away? It's just a broader question.
Nicely done, Don.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I was thinking as you were talking, wow, what a beautiful description for someone for one opinion. And you probably that resonates with a lot of people in the room, but there are other opinions. So we're not.
Keep that question. I think we'll present that to Chris.
I don't know what the outcome is going to be. That's the process.
I think what Don's trying to say is we're unique, and what makes it unique and what attracted us here was the rural nature of the village. If we try to be like every other city in Northeast Ohio, we're just going to homogenize the village, and it won't be the place we wanted to come to in the first place, and it may not be the place we want to stay.
You know, there's this sense that this whole process is meant to try to figure out how can we change the village. That is not the goal whatsoever. The reason to the outside perspectives was to go outside and have the outside world, realtors being one group, on what do you see as buyers are looking at Gates Mills versus other communities. Your comment about access is interesting. I wasn't personally we've done 4 interviews or 3. We have one more tomorrow, or Sandra and I. We have 8 teams interviewing. We'll be up above 30 realtors when we're all done here. And some of those questions we're trying to be, do they view that as the positive that it is, that we are so close to 271? I can just tell you personally from the 3 interviews and some of the other comments from some of the other teams, I think we're going to conclude that the village can do a much better job of marketing itself because we do have so many of the attributes. And we are certainly picking up that all of the attributes, the positive things are things that we should be preserving for sure. So I'm not getting anything that says, oh my gosh, you guys got to change everything. You got to, bring lots of development. You got to do any of those things. At this point, I'm not sure we're going to, other than something like marketing and some of that. I haven't picked up anything that's just earth shattering, but it's just an attempt to get some outside perspectives to feed into the advisory committee on top of data. So I think everybody that's been doing it has found it very interesting, but when you accumulate the data, which will all be publicly available, and the consultant is going to take a stab at those big takeaways And then we're gonna, at that meeting, it's gonna be very interesting to see what everybody's take on it is, and then how we come to some, how do we summarize that to present to the advisory committee? You participating, that's a perfect example of how I hope this process works, that you'll stand up and say, hey, I looked at this data and I just had a different take. So I think it's going to be pretty dynamic, but it's working pretty well so far, just that background stuff.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Celeste McClung, Chagrin River Road. Can you tell us maybe 3 things that you are trying to achieve through the creation of this new master plan? You mentioned that, you're not trying to do anything disruptive or whatever, but what is it that you're trying to achieve by doing this new master plan?
I'll give you a personal one, and it actually relates to your husband, interestingly. The big controversy on the Glennis property on River Road brought a lot of people's attention. Some people want to see some sort of cluster development. A lot of people don't. Seems to be pretty strong sentiment that maybe it'd be okay, but not in my backyard. And in a meeting in front of council, it was in the basement of this building. There were, I think, 80, 90 residents in that meeting, including Mr. Atton. And about 2/3 of the way through the discussion, it's the first time I think I'd ever seen David, he stood up and said, the whole problem here is this village doesn't have a master plan. It's like, boom, light bulb goes off in my head. I'm hoping we resolve once and for all this controversy that in this village, that some people think we should have cluster homes and some people think we shouldn't. And that we at least get a clear sense of direction of how we should be addressing issues like that and anything else that the data comes up with. I know this village is reluctant to change. I get it. But also, there is a saying that if you don't change, then change is going to come that you're not going to like. So we're just trying to figure out do we need to consider anything to make sure that we maintain our attractiveness. Now, I totally agree with Michael Press that everybody that moved here for the ambiance and the culture and the serenity of the village, et cetera. I can't imagine anybody thinks we ought to be disrupting that. But if we don't keep pace and we're not as attractive to future buyers, you've heard me make this statistic. I've said it publicly several times. We have 1,000 homes in this village. If the average home turned over every 10 years, we'd have 1,000 new residents in this village 10 years from now. If it took 20 years, by the way, 10 years is slower than the national average. The number's less than that. We're probably slower than 10 years. If it was 20 years, we'd still have 500 new residents in the village in the next 10 years. What are they looking for? And if we don't at least try to take that into account, hopefully all of the amenities we have, but maybe there's some things we need to enhance, not just on a land use basis. But if we don't maintain our attractiveness, then it will affect our housing prices because the demand will go someplace else. And so I don't know what that is. And, to me, it's addressing that question. If the answer is you are a unique community, we had a realtor interview this morning, Sandra and I. I should have her come and speak to all of you. Don't change a thing in the village. I love it. I love selling it. It's exactly what, and don't you ever change a single thing in the village. Okay, interesting perspective.
It's her happy place.
It's her happy place. So, if that's the outcome of the master plan, that's the recommendation of 25 people that have worked rigorously for close to a year, and that recommendations do that. Great. We took an attempt at it. We said we reviewed everything and we need to stay the course and there's nothing we need to do different. So I hope that we come out with a clear sense. I'm not personally anticipating that there's a lot of controversy coming, but I hope that the advisory committee is going to talk about a wide range of topics. It's not my role to steer that. That's the consultant's role. We just want to make sure the advisory committee happens and that the meetings take place when they take place. But the consultant runs those meetings and she's a professional, has done this many, many times, and will bring out what she thinks based on all the data and what's deliberated, that they think we ought to do if it's different or maintain. So it's a guide, and it could be it's doing exactly what we're doing. So I don't know if that helped. I don't know if there's any three things. I don't have any personal criteria for one thing or another. So. Okay.
Anyone else?
So my name's Betsy. I live on Brigham, 7400 Brigham. And I heard you state that we, Gates Mills, wants to keep pace. Keep pace with what? Keep pace with what?
Well, you, I guess you tell me. Do you think society's changing?
Are homes not selling? Is that the
Well-
issue? What's the issue? Who is it that we as council want to
Keep
keep
pace.
pace with?
Well, I think Chip spoke to some of that, but let me answer Celeste's question and maybe yours too. And that is, 2 years ago, houses were not turning over here.
How
They were-
many? How many?
Oh, the statistics will show
I
that.
wanna know.
100?
We're on a fact-finding mission. How many houses?
We don't know. I don't know that date
Well, I
exactly.
think we should know.
Well, they're going to give us that data. The advisory committee will get that data.
Calm down and not talk to me in a sarcastic tone. For
But-
number one, I think that's where we should start. Go ahead.
So, in the 2 years ago, the market was so much different than it is now. I don't know how many homes, but on average, they were on the market for, 100 days or more. Now it's 4 days, 5
Right.
days. At that time, I think there was more interest in, or more urgency, let's say, to have a master plan for the reason about the limo property. And then also the fact that people were concerned that houses weren't turning over. And if you did want to move out, you weren't able to do that.
Going back, as you said.
Yes,
is
2
that
years ago.
correct?
So we're in a bubble now. The world has changed. COVID has happened. People are working from home. People are coming into this community from outside Northeast Ohio. Some realtors told us 50% or more are moving in from outside. It's fascinating. What if that changes tomorrow or the next day? Are we prepared for that? So when you talk about keeping pace with all of these trends, and another trend are multi-generational
okay,
families,
okay.
parents, children, adults. So that's a type of housing that's different than a couple who's downsizing. So what are the trends and will we be prepared?
So the reality is it's speculation.
It's speculation.
Absolutely speculation.
Well-
And I will also say, I've lived in this village for 53 years, not 62, but 53. And I've never once heard of any cluster home development until the fiasco on River Road started. And I think that was your son, correct? Who sold, am I correct? Or am I mistaken? That's the first I ever heard of any potential
It
cluster
was
home
brought by the
development.
resident that bought the property to the village.
But your son was the realtor, am I?
Well, he sold it
Am
to
I
the guy that
mistaken?
bought the property,
Okay, so
yes.
he was the realtor. That's the first time I ever heard of any potential cluster home development, and I've lived here for 53 years.
Well, we have had it in other places. I can guarantee you that.
In this village and other places,
Oh, absolutely.
cluster
Red
homes?
Fox,
Pardon me?
the Red Fox.
The Red Fox.
Where the restaurant,
burned
That was a
down.
cluster home,
where they got permission to build a couple.
and that was in
Cluster
the
hou-
city, correct? In the village, and aren't there sewers there?
And then,
Wait, aren't there sewers there?
well,
Aren't
that
there?
was before sewers.
Okay, so then how did we handle the cluster, the
Well, the
septic
court
issues there?
awarded that to, it was a trial, and they got that as, from being sued, they got to build cluster houses. But then after that, the property
So
was sold.
The Red Fox, I don't understand what you're saying with regard
Well,
to the sewer.
it,
That's an issue.
it doesn't
issue.
exactly pertain to this. The two houses were part of an award from a trial where the village was suing a property owner because they had let it go into derelict.
Default? Is
Yeah.
it? Okay, go ahead.
And so that was that. Then there was another one that was the property at Old Mill in Berkshire. And there were two different cluster development things presented for that property.
And what year was this about?
What year was it?
4 years ago.
4 years ago. So this was relatively.
Not that long ago.
Okay, okay.
I mean, it has been presented.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we had a resident who owned, and the gentleman that bought the property on River Road
Mhm.
lives on Cedar Road and still owns property in Gates Mills. And he brought it to P and Z, which is the appropriate place to do it. If P and Z had ever voted on it, which they never did, and Craig will attest to that, it never got to that. Just because it passed at P and Z doesn't mean it passes in the village. It would have to come to council.
Mhm.
And I'm on.
Well, hang on.
On record.
I'll take exception to that one. There was a cluster home development effort on County Line Road a couple of years ago, and P and Z passed zoning variances to the zoning rules to allow cluster homes specifically.
Okay.
And that was done without council.
But it never got filed. It would have had to come to council. It never got filed.
The reason that one didn't come to council is a well-off resident on Gray Eagle Chase came in and bought up the property, and that preempted the process. But you heard my remarks earlier about P and Z membership. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Just to add, there is an ordinance on the books for a conservation cluster development. I have had, I can't tell you how many residents expressed to me, these are older people, that they'd love to stay in the village, but they want to downsize. The facts would tell you that all of our surrounding communities are putting cluster houses in, cluster developments. You certainly see it all over Pepper Pike. Moreland Hills is putting in a big one. Chagrin Falls, there's a big development that may or may not come true in Hunting Valley. I'm not advocating at all that we should do that, but you can see it in other communities. So it's not a foreign concept. So
I do have
There's
to make.
cluster homes in every direction within 2 miles.
right, exactly.
We
And I
don't
must
need them in the
say,
village.
We may not.
necessarily.
there
We
is
may
a
not. I'm just pointing to
There
the,
is a distinction in those communities that you enumerated. There are significant, not our cute little quaint commercial districts. There's a significant difference.
oh,
All of those communities.
I agree. I'm not, we're not trying to argue. I'm just telling you that
And I want to make sure that you understand too, I think if something were to come out of this comprehensive plan or whatnot, as it relates to cluster housing, we're back to planning, which I'm hopeful that this plan has more than just planning on it. I think it would go to it would come back to council, and council would probably put it on the ballot. It would be a decision of the whole. It wouldn't be a decision of council.
correct.
Sure, Les.
You got to come up to the speaker.
This isn't something you care about for that. My question is, why the devil do you set these meetings? It is the most inconvenient possible time. for people. They haven't had dinner, they would like to be having their cocktails. Other communities where, back when I practiced law, they usually would have their public meetings after dinner. So I just ask you to think about that as you're going forward, to not have any more 6 o'clock meetings, whether it's council or these various committees you're going to have.
Okay, thank you, Les. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi, Caitlin, Chagrin River Road. I did miss my reservation for Sarah's Place. That's okay. I can make a drink at home. But I just wanted to ask, so at the end of this, if the residents all just say that they like Gates Mills the way it is, they don't want any development because, like you said, you can go to Chagrin Falls, all these other communities, people move here specifically for the land, the woods. Do you think it was worth almost $60,000 to have this survey asking questions? A simple question to all the residents, $60,000?
For me, Caitlin, the process of having people get together, have these discussions, having neighborhood meetings.
This is free.
Is improving the village in and of itself. People who don't know each other are talking with each other. People who whispered about these different issues behind closed doors are going to have a chance to do it, in neighborhood groups and publicly. We're going to air this and
I would love to
hopefully
talk
it's
to
gonna
every
go
one of
away.
you guys if, to
Yeah.
instead of just a outside source. I would love to talk to the council people, and I'm sure other residents would love to say their own opinion, even if they aren't, even if their backgrounds are, in trucking or mechanic. So I think their opinions are just as valuable. I think anybody who pays Gates Mills tax, their opinion is valuable. That's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, we agree.
Anyone else?
Lisa Pilla, Mayfield Road. I just want to say that I'm glad Michael and David brought up what they did. I don't know if it was expressed, I don't even know if I'm north or south on Mayfield. I'm by St. Francis Church, trying to figure that out. But I think it is intimidating. I've been here 32 years. My kids went to Gatesville Elementary, which I loved. Love the, people move here for the woods, the nice neighborhood and the school. And I think everyone's making, he had a good point. It is really intimidating. There are just those few people I feel that always control Gates Mills, and it really doesn't matter what other people think. That's just how I feel. But even these meetings can be intimidating, just walking in here, how it feels. But, and the thing is so crazy is, like, I'm looking at that video tonight. Why do we even need that? You can walk out, I can see in front of my house, the road looks pretty good to me. Or, whatever, how did it work all this time without all these, and this whole committee about, we need committees, we need this, what if Gates Mills change? Why is everyone worried about that? People move to Gates Mills because it's wooded, it's beautiful, it's a good school system. Yeah, they don't want a lot of progress. They like, there's a park like. I don't think we need all these committees to say about all this and what happens. I think it's really ridiculous about what do we need to find out? We moved here because it was a good place to raise our kids. I love Gatesville Elementary. It's a beautiful place. I got the church right next door. I just think, I do think it'd be great for a coffee shop or something. I love that. I love Sarah's. But I think everyone's getting so carried away. These committees, I just think are getting really ridiculous about having to figure this out and that. And it's really, I don't know why we need all this. It's a lot of inexpensive. And again, I'd like some services. I keep saying it. I'd like my garbage picked up. I pay $10,000 a year. We don't need to get garbage pickup. I think everyone's worried about really silly things. And these committees are just so unnecessary. That's just what I think. What's there to say? We live in Gates Mills again. It's beautiful. It's very woodsy. The houses are great, very historical. But I have to say that David is right, and Michael, about it seems like there are the few people. I think it's more old money. You were saying north and south. I think it's more people have been here forever and just kind of run things, or old money. I'm not really sure, but there are those people that just always seem to run everything.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyone else? Ed?
Unfortunately, I guess I'm the only one who lives up on the West Hill here. I feel very lonely. We moved, when I moved here with my wife, I got as far away from my mother-in-law in downtown that I could. That was as far as I could get. I think the fear here is that we've got a lot of people on this list that have hidden agendas. So they volunteered to get on this list so that they could promote their own individual programs. And I really wish that we could table this and see if we can get some participation from the silent majority on this. So as far as, this committee goes, the mayor had one for free, and that was all voted down for some reason. And now we're paying $50,000-$60,000 for a company that doesn't live here. We're finding right now with houses changing here in Gates Mills that we're getting a lot of house flippers because we go out there with a packet and say, welcome to Gates Mills, and there's nobody there. So, this is another problem. So I wish we could table this and then get some suggestions of who we can put on this list. I just was watching the internet and unfortunately I didn't write down the name of the company. Did a survey in Ohio, I think of the 100 top places to live in Ohio. And I went through the list and places like Arlington, all over there. And then all of a sudden I got to it and number 1 was Hunting Valley. So I searched further and number 3 is Gates Mills in this entire state for people that want to live here. So, yeah. So I would like to request that we table this until we can get some better suggestions on people.
Well, I'm going to call for or ask you to call for the question. We do have a motion and a second. And I guess I ask council if you feel that the process we've undertaken is, has been appropriate. Ask you to vote in favor, and if not, vote against.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Call the roll.
Second. Okay. Anton?
No.
Allworder,
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press.
Why don't we put it off the vote till April?
We're in a vote.
We're in a vote.
We're in a vote?
Yes.
I'll abstain.
I don't think you can do that.
can't
You got to
abstain,
vote
you're
yes.
here.
All right.
You're
I
here.
don't have a conflict. Fine, I'll vote no.
Ed, why do you suppose that we?
There's already a motion.
There's already a
Already
motion.
I know that.
Oh, well,
Let me just talk just for a second.
No,
Why do you propose that? we delay the
I
vote?
disagree. We're following process here. You had an opportunity to give input for over an hour. We're in a vote.
Steinbrink,
Yes.
Turner, Welsh.
No.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is council matters. Anyone? Mike?
I'd like to say happy birthday to Sandra Turner.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Any other business from the audience?
I have a question. Where is the money that you collect from your speeding?
I can't hear you, Trina. Sorry.
Trina Nemistil, Sugar and River Road. Now that the speeding cameras have passed, where is the money going to be allocated from the speeding tickets? Yeah, the revenues.
Well, at the moment, it would go to the general fund.
Okay, so then it's just spent anywhere. You're not going to allocate it to,
Well, we may. We actually have time between now and then to just rediscuss it. And our treasurer will be involved in that. So the answer is we haven't
you don't know.
changed anything other than general fund at the moment. But there has been some discussion.
Some of the other communities that put in cameras ended up generating a fair amount of revenue, and they came up with programs to reinvest in their community and things like that. We don't really know. I keep saying that I'd really like, I understand a driver that goes north and south on Mayfield Road and gets a citation, but I really want to meet the driver that does that a second time and a third time, because a lot of the traffic goes back and forth. So we may see some revenue up front. It could very well drop off very quickly, and then it's just not that big a factor. So the main issue again is safety. So I don't think we even have a sense of what the revenue might be. So
There may be after the first month of, not real tickets.
right,
warnings.
that even the
that will
trial
have-
period. And
Could
see
we
how that changes.
reinstitute garbage collection free then? With
Well,
that
I mean,
money?
sure, that could be
I mean,
whatever.
yeah, anything's possible.
Trina, did you have a suggestion on what that revenue might be used for? Just yeah, sorry. Yeah, did you have and we can talk after if you want. Because I'm open. I think it's something we should, council should consider and something we'll take up on the safety committee.
For safety, not income, then it should be for safety.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. 100%. Indeed, that's what Mayfield Village has done.
Yeah,
They're tying it to incremental safety services.
we can do that. Les, or Charlie, sorry.
Hey, Charlie Baker, I'm on Echo Glen, I also have property on Mayfield. I just would like to see council confirm that this advisory committee, that those meetings will be open and the residents of the city can.
All meetings of all the parts of the comprehensive plan will be open, and we plan to record them so that you could watch them if you're unavailable.
Okay. And the notice of that will continue to appear at the post office
Yes, and online.
and online. Okay,
There,
that's all I need.
actually online, we're waiting for the communications and marketing part of the plan to load into the website. They're going to have their own section where you can go to for all these different things.
I think I mentioned this, but there was a notice a week or so ago about a meeting to discuss the presentation.
And that got canceled.
It got canceled, but the only way it got canceled was to take the notice down. And my paranoia. I
That's
said to
gotta be
myself,
on
well,
the
the reason they
website.
took the notice down was because they don't want us to attend. So, you know, you
It's
need to
re-
put up a sign that says the meeting is actually canceled instead of just taking the sign down. Okay?
Thank you, Charlie. Anyone else? Thank you for coming. The meeting's adjourned.
I move to adjourn.
Need a motion, sorry.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Anton,
Yes.
Allworder.
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press. Press,
Michael.
adjourn. Yep. Steinbrink,
Yes.
Turner, Welsh.
Okay, good to meet you. Are you going to be coming here regularly?